Hi, my name is Shmuel Ur, and generally I work as an inventor, but this time it will not be about patents. I will try to make a case in this presentation on why bias is more dangerous than fake news. And by bias, I mean the kind of bias you have when you read high quality newspapers like the New York Times, or you listen to the BBC or the CNN or Fox News, where generally some of them don't lie all that much. And in addition, they tell you what their bias is. So you think you're sort of protected because you know the bias, and I will try to make a case that you are not, that this is really important. I'm going to start my story by talking about work I was doing in IBM Research. When I joined IBM Research, this is 24 years ago, I was asked to find an important problem and solve it. And the problems that I looked at was how to improve testing of processors. Testing of processors is extremely important because if a bug is found by a customer, then the processors have to be replaced. And we've seen this could be $500 million or $1 billion problem for cost for a bug which is not that important. So one of the main ways to test processors is the following. You have an automatic test generator which generates tests. Tests are programs that you can run on the processors. You don't know what the output is, but you want to generate all sorts of very interesting tests to make sure the processors run correctly. In IBM, we had about 100 people working on programs that generate tests. Now, those tests are generated executed on the processor, but they're also executed on the reference models. Reference models are things that does the same as the processor, but it doesn't have to be as high quality. It doesn't have to work as fast. It's different, but it should give the same outcome. So you take a test that was generated by automatic test generator, you run them on both, and you see the result, and you compare the result. And if the result is the same, then everything is fine. And if it's not, then you have to fix something. Maybe the processor had a bug in it, which is why you're doing this exercise. Maybe the reference model had a bug in it, so you need to fix the reference model. Or maybe the automatic generator didn't generate a good test. You fix something, and you continue to do that. And at the time, we had a floor of machines generating tests and executing them and comparing them, doing about 200 million tests per day. This is 20 years ago, or 20 some. So what is the highest risk you could have in such a case? If the reference model has a bug in it, then it will cause you some work. When you compare them, you'll find there is a problem and you'll need to fix the bug. The same if the program has a bug in it and if the automatic test generator has a bug in it. But there is one specific bug which is very dangerous, and the bug is that you're not generating all the tests you can do. So I became the leading expert in IBM on coverage, which is how to check if the tests are doing what they're supposed to do. It's a very narrow field. And for example, for a test generator, the first thing I checked was that every computer instruction can be generated, about 400 of them. And it turned out that 7 of them were never generated because of a bug in the automatic test generator. There was a new version, and it had 7 new instructions and were not added. And then I checked that every instruction could do every exception and so forth. And the idea was to check that the automatic test generator actually generates everything you need. And if not, that's a problem, because you don't understand the world as it is. So now we're passing to what happens in the real world. So the real world generates news, and those news are reported by the left or the right. So for example, on the left, it would be reported by the CNN, the New York Times, and on the right, it will be reported on Fox, for example, and it will be reported by your friends in Facebook and Twitter. And if it's an important news, one which is important to both sides, then it will be reported on both sides. And if they don't agree, then you find out that it's fake news, which is fix something, or else you continue. If there's fake news, somebody else will say it's a fake news. But another thing that happened is that both sides report things that they like that the other side just ignores. And then you get the bubble. And then every person on the left knows things that the person on the right doesn't know because they're not reported on the right, and the other way around. And you get to keep your view of the world because anything that would conflict with it is not going to get reported. So this is why it's the same, in a sense, to the coverage. I want to make sure that I'm getting all sources of information, not just the ones that somebody think are fit for me, or the one that it's not only fit for me, but the one that will make sure that I have the right view of the world. I want to have the true view of the world. So I know many people that when I argue with them and they don't like my facts, they say they can get new facts. But that's not the way those things work. For example, scientific theory is one that can be shown to be false using counterexamples. Otherwise, it's not a theory. For example, if you say that God exists, there is no way to disprove it. But if you say that something like water always boil at 100 degrees, then you can find a place where it doesn't boil at 100 degrees, maybe, and then you disprove this simple theory. Or here we have an example. All the tall people are smart. I'm tall, I'm smart. All the tall people, I think, are smart. But of course, it's easy to find example that shows that this is wrong. The problem with having news which are biased is they don't give you examples which don't fit your idea of the world. So they just give you what you want to have, and if something does not fit your theories, then it's not going to be reported to you. So for example, if you have a theory that all members of some group, Jews, Muslims, American bankers, are nasty, and you only see news that confirm your theory, then it's not going to be challenged. If you're the kind of person that when your theories are challenged, you're annoyed, this is not the lecture for you. And if you like fake news to support your theory, again, that's not the lecture for you. But if you want to actually understand the world, what you want is for your views to be challenged. And for that, you need different kind of information sources. I'll give an example of partial stories that impact our understanding. And I'm going to go into actually a very loaded topic, which is slavery. Slavery is a really nasty thing. It's one of the things that existed all through history. Now it's at the low point, does not exist all that much as it used to. And it's really horrible. And one of the horrible stories that we know about slavery, when we think about slavery, is white people taking black people from Africa to the United States and having them as slaves. And this has impact, it was a horrible story, and it has impact through the ages, and it still has impact, and people still feel the slavery and the results. And indeed, when people think about slavery, this is the story that they think about, but that's not the only thing that's true about slavery. So for example, most people don't realize that if you're talking about the number of slaves that go to the United States, we're talking about a number between 400 and 500,000. And in the same years that this slavery existed in the United States, 5 million about arrived to Brazil as slaves. And again, in the same years, about 5 million came to the Caribbeans. And about 15 millions came to European countries. To Muslim countries. Europe didn't have slaves, my mistake. So a lot of slaves were going to all sorts of places, including the United States, but the United States was not the major one. What might be more surprising is that white slaves were being taken from Europe by Muslim countries. So at the same time that we're talking about the 500,000 coming to the United States, about 4 million came from Russia and the Slavs country to Turkey. And about 1 million, it's called the Berber slavery, came from Italy and Spain to North Africa, were taken as slaves. And this is, we don't know, and we are talking about the same time. So if we talk about the story, we know the story. When we think about slavery, we think about black slavery to the United States, which is 1% of the people taken slaves in those years. And the fact that we don't know the entire story is interesting because when we think about it, we think about white people taking black people as slaves, which is certainly true. But we don't think about actually much other stories which are bigger, and therefore lots of, for example, black people in the United States will identify with the Islam because of slavery, even though the number of people that were taken as slaves by Islamic countries is much bigger, both to Islamic countries and by Islamic people, and then sold to the United States. So what we have is we have a partial story that we know because of bias in our reporting. We see a lot more stories about slavery in the United States than about slavery elsewhere, and therefore a very important story, the slavery in the United States, becomes the dominating story, although other, at least as big stories exist. I'm going to talk about an article by Matti Friedman called "The Most Important Story on Earth," and I think it's a really really good article. And it was written after he served as a reporter in the AP in Israel. And this is what he talked about, the reporting about Israel. So the first thing that he says is that the Israeli conflict is considered to be the most important conflict. And what does it mean, the most important conflict? There are more reporters here than in China or India or Russia or entire Africa or entire Arab countries. So more reporters in Israel, which is a very, very small country. And the conflict is framed as the Palestinian-Israeli conflict because had it been the Israeli-Arab conflict, then Israel is only 0.2% of the land. But if it's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, then Israel became the big giant. Now, why is the conflict important? For example, there are many, many more people dying in many other conflicts. There are many people being shot in Chicago than in the entire in Israel and the Palestinian territories. So why is it so important? It's so important because we have so many reporters reporting it. And the story is not only Israel, it's not all of Israel, it's just bad things that you can say about Israel. If you could say bad thing about corruption, say in Israel, it's a big story. Corruption in Palestine is not an interesting story. Another thing which is interesting about the story is that some things are intentionally not allowed to say. For example, if you want to report from Gaza, and all the major news sources want to report from Gaza, there are things you're not allowed to say. Because if you say them, if you're lucky, you'll be thrown away, and if you're not lucky, you'll not live. So people who are hearing the stories, they don't know that the story is being censored. They don't know what is not being said. And sometimes you see things that are small reporters that didn't get the message that only the bad things about Israel are to be report it. But it's not a big thing because you don't read about it. It's some Italian news or some Finnish news. When they say, for example, that missiles were shot out of school. The narrative, this is from the article, the narrative where the Palestinians are moderate and the Israelis are being increasingly extreme. In 2007, he cites an example. Olmert gave an offer, and the offer was to give 100% of the territories back, and this was rejected. And they came up with the maps of the offer, and they were not allowed to publish it because it's not. It doesn't fit the stories that you want to say. You can find the story about later. You can find the Palestinians saying they should have accepted the offer. But the important thing is, notice that the problem here is bias. There is no fake reporting. You're just not reporting something that happens. And therefore, as an audience, you don't know about it. I'll give 2 comments on the BBC reporting. The first one is that, with the one exception during the Eurovision, the story goes like that. 20,000 missiles about were shot from Gaza to the area next to it. And when a missile is shot from Gaza, or 10 missiles are shot from Gaza, it's not news. It's just not news. And then missiles are shot again, and it's not news. And then, not news in the sense that it's just not reported. And then if Israel shoots back, and Israel will shoot back, then the story will become, and there'll be a story, Israel attacked Gaza today, and sometimes it would say in reaction to a missile that came to Israel, and it will not say by whom. So Israel is attacking Gaza, that's the story. Hamas is not the story, it's not mentioned. You're not allowed to talk about that. And another comment on it. 5 days ago, I see an article saying, you see the title here, says Somalia frightening network of Islamic spies. And in it, they talk about the spies in Somalia, and they talk about the fact that if you're a reporter in Somalia for the BBC, every day that you're in Somalia, you get a report, and the report would look something like that. At 5:30, you woke up. At 9, you got to the bank. You went, you opened an account, you were dressed in a green shirt. when you went out, we should tell you your bodyguards were not doing a good job. They were drinking at the time. We could have killed you easily. You went this and you did this, and you get this report. So what the BBC is telling us in Somalia is that they're being threatened, which they don't tell for the Hamas, but they do tell in Somalia. But they don't tell you what the result is. They're being threatened with some goal. We don't know what the goal is. So what does the jihadi terrorist organization want them not to report? We don't know, and they don't report it. And I'm not following Somalia closely, so I don't know what's happening there. I know for a fact that the BBC is biased in Somalia, but I don't know how, and it will be just a huge amount of work to figure it out. Here's another example. So in December of 2017, Politico came out with a huge article that an expose of Politico. Politico is not a right-wing or a left-wing organization. It's just it's a fairly good source of information. And they said that during the 2015, when Obama was working on the drug deal with, on the deal with Iran, the atomic deal, the Justice Department of the United States were trying to do a big operation against Hezbollah, who was selling drugs in the United States. And they were getting ready to arrest them. And the White House told them not to, which they didn't. And the reason the White House didn't want them to arrest them was that they thought that if they would arrest them, this would be a bad timing and would hurt the deal with Iran. So this was the story that came up with the Politico. It was a very large story. I don't remember how many words, but something like 20 pages or even more. And it's a very reputable source. So when I saw this thing, I made a prediction, and my prediction was that in CNN, the New York Times, and the BBC, this will not be reported. This will just not be news. You will not be told about that because it doesn't fit the right worldview. So as you can see, lots of people were following it, 105 comments. And people are saying, nah, you're just talking. And then some people said, whoa, I checked, and it doesn't appear in any news source that I know. And then, as you would expect, it would take a few days for it to reach the main newspapers. And the reason it reaches a few days is because they have to check it out. It's not easy, and they don't want to publish it unless if it's fake. So, okay, so 2 days later, it appears in the Wall Street Journal and NPR and many other places. New York Times, BBC, and CNN are still not reporting it as I projected. And some of the people that I know that think that the New York Times, BBC, and CNN is how they get their news started to figure out that they need to get more news because they were not getting those news. The New York Times eventually, a week later, reported it because it was like the biggest news at the time, and basically by saying, there was an article, it's not completely true, and it's not an important news anyway. That's not the only time, and from time to time, lots of people are I would make those kind of prediction on news, and usually it's correct, not always, of course. So, in conclusion, what is it that can you do about it? The answer is that you can't do that much, because it's really hard to fight, difficult to fight bias. Fighting fake news is easy. You look at the news, you verify it, and if it's fake, it's enough. But fighting bias, you have to know what it is that you don't know, and that's hard. So the way to do it is you want to puncture your bubble by reading mostly, or at least a lot, of news sources that you don't like. And they will present things that you'll need to figure out if they're true or not, and likely they're true, and you'll learn something. You'll get out of your bubble. And just follow also Facebook friends that you don't agree with on topics that you care about. What do? I have more time than most. I follow a few topics mainly related to the Middle East very closely, so I read lots of news sources. And I read news sources that I don't like every day. I follow links. I go to workshops by the groups that I don't agree with. And often, as a result, I am that Facebook friend for my friend, the one who punctures their bubble. So this is the talk about why I think bias is so dangerous. I just wanted to add a little bit, which is a different topic, on why reference models are so useful. And this is about patents. So on the right, you see the world that it might look to you, as it might look to you if you had augmented reality glasses. So for example, it would show you where you should go, it would change cat to dogs, it would change the sky to purple and the cars to Mercedeses, and could do all sorts of things. And if the augmented reality was good, you don't know if it's true or not. This could be very dangerous because you could get into accidents. For example, it could be that it changed the road to blue, and there was a hole in the road, and it covered it with blue, and you don't know now that there is a hole in the road. Another problem, somebody could be malicious to you, and you download this nice app that changes cats to dogs, but it also erases kids in your street. So how would you know? What can you do? How can you protect yourself from mistakes or attacks by those apps? So what you could do is you could compare the real world, because your device sees the real world with the camera, to what you're being shown. And the questions that you have is what you're being shown dangerous? Obviously, everything is changed, so telling you that it changed is not useful. So how can you figure out if what you're being shown is dangerous? What you do is you take a program that does automatic driving, and you execute the automatic driving on both with the changes and without the changes. And if it's the same, then it's fine. So for example, if a cat was changed to a dog, and the programs decide either both of them to run over it or to run around it, it's the same. But if a kid was changed into a dog, and one of them decide to run over it, and one of them decide to run around it, then what you need to do if they don't agree is to remove the augmentation, because you want to live in the real world. That's one example where a reference model is very useful. This is how you find bugs. Second example is sort of more different, I guess. So you're watching a football game, and you want to tell Ronaldo what to do. So you shout at the TV and you tell him what to do, but he ignores you. What can you do? How can you make him do what you want him to do? So what you could do is press the button that says, I want to tell Ronaldo what to do. I want to start having input. And when you press the button, you suddenly see the game twice. Nothing exciting happened so far. Basically, the screen is changed to two screens. In both of them, you see the game. But in one of them, what you see is not the game, but you see a computer game that follows the game. So you see the people are not real people, but a computer game. And in a computer game, you can tell people what to do. So you can start from a situation in the real game and tell Ronaldo what to do. Now, those two games will not be similar to each other. So after a while, you can kill, maybe after 30 seconds, you kill the computer game and continue to watch the real game. And in the end, you can ask which Ronaldo is better, the real one or my reference model. So thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed it.